I would like to introduce today's speaker. Kenny Friedel has spent most of his life in St. Lawrence County. He retired from Potsdam Central School in 2014, and he's been a real estate agent ever since, officially as his job. We all know him from the many other things he does, especially as a train aficionado. So somewhere in the middle of that timeline, he received a degree in agriculture from Canton ATC, which we now know as SUNY Canton. So Kenny is not only an avid railroad enthusiast, he's also a historian, a researcher specializing in World War I railways, engine mechanics, which you'll hear a bit about today, and developments in transportation technology. And airlines and airplanes are sort of one of his new loves, which kind of fit under the umbrellas of those other categories.
Thank you, Carly.
Yes, he lives in Potsdam with his wife Betsy and his Pomeranian Peyton. I thought I had to mention that.
God love you, Peyton.
And an undisclosed number of model trains. He would not actually share a number with me. And 2 backyard railroads. So now it is my great pleasure to welcome Kenny Friedel, and I think you're going to really enjoy his talk.
Well, thanks for all my friends and acquaintances that are here, and thank you, Carlene, and thank you for this museum. And I've got to qualify where we're coming from and where I want to go. The reason I'm here in Canton with this is because, and I credit where credit's due, Professor Robert Wyant was a retired professor, and him and his wife are both gone. But he wanted to do a book on Huff-Daland. And so about 3 years ago I came here, I had some time, and I went through, there's 4, I haven't even got to the 5th box. So this story, I'm just starting the story, and I just want to get people interested, and you can follow up, okay? You can follow, and I'm going to go down the path, and I'm going to stop and say, take it from here, guys, because there's so much to this. And when you talk about Huff-Daland, or mention it in this county, oh, it was just a whoosh, whoosh, it was just a couple of bright-eyed kids that came up with a plan that didn't work. Well, it did work. It did work. It was instrumental in the development of aviation. We're going back 100 years, 1920, end of the end of World War I. Okay, World War I, and we've got to think about 1919, 1920. We had a pandemic. We had the end of a war, and production on thousands of airplanes and thousands of engines. They had something like 20,000 engines, airplane, and the engines were, for you guys that know engines, a Continental, Azani, and there's Lawrence, and it just, for the mechanic that's not familiar with history, this should blow your mind, because it blew mine. And I said, where do we're talking 200 horsepower airplane engines in 1919, 1918, you know, I mean, weren't we still using horse and buggies? And so this is a research and development. I thought about it last night. This is really, the Huff-Daland Dusters was a research and development company. See, maybe I have it, maybe I don't. Okay, and what I did to understand it, I divided it into 4 companies. 4 companies. And with my real estate and business experience, as limited as may be, I followed the money and who owned what, when, and where. And this picture here, this first one, this is, I can go backwards on this now too. This is Huff-Daland Dusters Incorporated, Monroe, Louisiana. And why this picture, and this is what got me, why this picture, and what's Monroe, Louisiana got to do with Ogdensburg? And, but Huff-Daland Dusters was owned by the Ogdensburg Corporation. And people from Ogdensburg got on the train and went to Monroe, Louisiana, and they operated that business. And it turned out, in my thinking, and from what limited information I have on it, it was their most lucrative. And then Delta, we've got 3 different stories going here. We've got stories from, it starts in Antique Boat Museum in Clayton. It comes to Ogdensburg. It goes to Monroe, Louisiana. And then it ends up in, the whole thing comes to a head at Bristol, Bristol, Pennsylvania, which is right near, it's on the Delaware River. And again, I divided it into four parts so I can understand it and explain it. And but the people, okay, let me start. Okay, trying to follow your directions here. Okay, so that I think is taken in Monroe, Louisiana, and airplanes need an overhaul, so many flight hours or whatever, and I think that they've gone through this this engine, or this plane that was a plane that was built in Ogdensburg. All right, let's move on to the next slide, and it starts with Joseph Layer and the St. Lawrence Boat Works, and he's in a boat with a gentleman, and it doesn't say, and he's the one on the right. They both got hats on, but and he was the greatest boat builder on the St. Lawrence River. There might have been somebody greater in Canada, but we're talking just on the south shore of the St. Lawrence. And he built boats, started in Clayton, worked his way up, hands-on, working as an apprentice, as a helper, learning the business and crafting wood and everything that goes with building boats. And the thing of it is that the planes that they ended up building were wood, okay? Steel did not come in so much until 1925, and that's when everything changed. They wanted steel hulls and steel fuselages and stuff like that. Now, the plane that we're going to focus on today is the Petrel, and that wingspan, this room is 26 this way and 30 something this way. Now, the wingspan on the puffer, the Petrel or whatever, the wingspan was about 32 feet. So we could actually put that plane together here. And then the fuselage was about 26 feet long. Okay, so that would fit in here. But let me get Mr. Leonard's situation out of the way. And what they did, he built boats up until the start of World War I. And of course, wars change our lives and dominate our lives, unfortunately, and we do what we have to do. And so he went to Buffalo and worked for Curtis Aircraft, and Curtis Wright Aircraft Company. And they had made the Jenny during World War I, and they produced a lot of planes. Many of the planes built in the United States never saw action in World War I. We didn't have a pilot school, and I'm getting off track here, but I want to go there. We didn't have any pilot schools to speak of, and our soldiers, airmen that went to Toronto to a Canadian flight school, because they had been practicing since the war started 3 or 4 years before we got involved. And okay, let me slow down a bit here. And so he went and built wooden airplane frames for World War I and whatever. So he came back, the end of the war, you had over 170,000 people involved in war production and aircraft production, and they were out of a job. So when these people, when Huff-Daland, and I want to talk about the people, and that's what I'm focusing on, because I know people, I think I do. And he came back, and this building here, this is on Adams Street, and Leonard Boat Works, and I don't know if this is dated or not, but I think this is what it looked like when the Huff-Daland Company showed up here. This is what it looked like. It needed a paint job, it needed windows, it needed everything, okay? And so he was in dire straits. He wanted to get back into the boat building industry, but again, the economy was just like we had and still have. We had a pandemic, we had high unemployment, we had 1920s, oh, it was terrible, and it generally is after any war. And, but down here at the bottom, yeah, this is the boats that Lanier made, and he was the world's greatest boat builder, the greatest one I've ever studied. And these are like 30 feet long, and over there is the lighthouse, and that's where the old rail car ferry was, and Fort Lee Lot Presentation was in there somewhere. And this was right next door to Standard Shade Roller, and of course that's all been leveled and everything. And eventually this building burned after 1927 or whatever. This building burned, but the Huff-Daland had moved out at that point. So nothing was heard as far as Huff-Daland was concerned. Now, let me see what we've got here. And is anybody going to sleep yet? No, not yet. Okay. How are you doing, Malcolm? Got you.
Still here, Kenny.
Okay, now, these people that were connected with Huff-Daland were, as Mr., I'll call him the professor, as the professor said in his notes, it was the Ivy League. And every college was represented, like Mr. Huff. Thomas Henry Huff went to MIT, Massachusetts, technology, and he took a course in aeronautics. And as he got into the course, they said to him, okay, you're going to hang around for the next 2 years and teach it, and teach aeronautics. And 19 aeronautics, what's that? Don't ask me because I don't know. But anyway, and everybody that came with Huff-Daland, and they came, DeLon and the whole list of people, and I'll have that here in a minute. And they're going to, and they see the situation. They meet with Mr. Lanier, the boat builder, and they need Lanier, and Lanier needs them too, because they come from Standard Aircraft in New Jersey, and they built something, and of course some of these figures you get, do they make sense and are they correct? But they made like 2,000 airplanes during World War I, and that was and it was a huge factory. And I was watching a thing the other night, a video, and it was, and I swear to God, it was either Standard Aircraft with hundreds of people there building airplanes, sewing the fabric onto the wooden wings, and all this and that. And the thing that they built down there was so significant was the Handley Page bomber for the British, because just like World War II, the Europeans were getting hammered, and it seems like we always have to bail out the Europeans for whatever reason. And so we started making their airplanes and shipping them overseas. That's why we ended up with so many engines, because we could make the engines in relatively calm and make good quality engines for their Air Force. So they needed each other, and they could see that. So Huff-Daland, okay, this is the board of directors, and you guys have probably already read that. And they formed, the first company they formed, St. Lawrence Boat Works Incorporated, October 11th, 1921. Because everybody needed each other, and this is what they did. Now, some of these names are certainly Ogdensburg names. I know the last name, Edward Medill, is, and I don't remember what he did, but I'm sure it was something very important. Grant Hall, Thomas Huff, Elliott DeLon, Charles Porter, and Charles Porter went on to be the top dog in Keystone Aircraft in 27 or whatever, and Alfred Lost and John Lord Lord and Edward Medill. And again, they were doing everything, because this was, in my mind, was research and development. Because what they had when they came here and I can only assume this, but I'm sure I'm right, and what I've read, I think I'm still correct on it, but they had contracts from the United States Army Air Corps, because being Americans and wanting to be first, the Army Air Corps and the administration is not, we want to be top, we want to have the biggest and the best, no matter what we do, and we want to be number one. And so production of all aircraft stopped. And so then they gave, I think Mr. Huff and Mr. Deland had a contract in their pocket from the Army Air Corps to build these smaller trainers, like the one I described, and then the one LB bomber, which was a wingspan of 66 feet and 50 some odd feet long, a huge thing. They made 10 of them, according to what I've read and studied. And again, they work side by side. And what has come up, and people say, what has this got to do with the Ogdensburg Airport? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Ogdensburg Airport wasn't even thought of. That didn't come in until the late 30s with the Works Progress Administration building airstrips. Now, when they came up here and took over this factory and everything, it was where was their landing strip? Well, of course, the St. Lawrence River. And the first small airplane, trainer plane that they launched in 1922, it was launched on the ice in February 1922 off from the St. Lawrence River. And again, they checked the ice, and of course with the Long Sault Rapids just east of there, the river never froze. But that's what it was. And in the summertime, when the ice went out, they would take the skis off and the wheels off and put pontoons on it. And that's how. And so that's how it got to be where we're at. All right, let's move on here and see what else we got. Okay, here's a list of the who's who. All right. Okay, we've done Joseph Lanier. We talked about Henry Huff and Elliot Deland. And Henry was older, or Thomas was older than Elliot. But Elliot had a vision problem. He was at Yale or Harvard, and and they had to read his tests and read his textbooks. But they said that the man never, if he read something, he never forgot it. So that's a good way to be, very good way to be. And then there's Lewis Randall, second vice president. Now, and then there's Costin Brown, and it's Mrs. Huff's brother, treasurer of the Clawfoot Company. And the only thing I can think of is the tub with the clawfoot. I don't know, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But and then the interesting person is, and a great role model to my daughters and granddaughters, and to yours too, Catherine Fitzgerald. She was 23 years old. She went to graduated high school from St. Mary's. She went to Ogdensburg Business School, and lo and behold, she became the first secretary of Huff-Daland Airplane Company, and she's just phenomenal. But that's another person that you can follow. Delta Airlines talks about her and all the great things she did. And then Harry Harris. Mr. Harris was an Army test pilot, and he did. I got volumes. I got volumes. I'm exaggerating, but it seems that thick after you read it a few times. But Mr. Harris was an Army test pilot, and he eventually became a partner with C.E. Woolman in the Delta Airlines, Delta Air Service, and when they purchased the Huff-Daland crop dusters from Huff-Daland. And this is where, over the years, Delta was a bit confused, but you follow the ownership, and there was a banker in Louisiana that put up the funds with some other investors, and Mr. Woolman and Harry Harris put together a package, and they bought the Huff-Daland crop dusting service, and it was very profitable. I think it was the biggest moneymaker for Huff-Daland, and it was quite by accident. Everything just happened. There's no real plan to it. They had built these trainers, these small Petros. That's enough of that. Okay. Here's Mr. Huff, and where's my bottle? The old farmer's got his bottle hidden here somewhere. Okay. I got this from Malcolm over there, so don't pay any attention here. And, okay, and again, and this is his resume, graduate of MIT, inspector of airplane design for MIT, engineer, student of an airplane company, Hyde Park, Boston, chief engineer, Standard Aerocraft Company, and chief designer, Naval Aircraft Factory, Brooklyn Navy Yard. Now, can you go any higher than that? I mean, and when this was all over with, he was the first one to withdraw from Huff-Daland. And the last business, number 4, Keystone, he sold out his interest in it, and Mr. DeLon, okay, let me get this again. Now this is Mr. DeLon, and he was a young man. We're all young men here in St. Louis County at one time, but anyway, the guy was a genius, and he had a problem seeing. He had a vision problem, but again, that didn't slow him down one iota. And again, look at this resume: graduate of Harvard, MIT, engineer, American Gas Tool Company, Chicago, engineer, Sullivan Machinery Company, Claremont, New Hampshire. Okay, and engineer, Standard Aerocraft Corporation, and he resigned from Curtiss Aeroplane Corporation. But again, the end of the war. Excuse me. But I think what it was the Army Air Service said, we're hiring you guys to design us some planes, because there wasn't much done from 1920 to 25. And these guys came up with patents, stuff that we only, self-sealing air tanks. You get and I don't know how that works, but supposedly the bad guy shoots a hole in your tank and it'll self-seal and you can get back to where you're going or continue the fight, whatever. And then they had shock absorbers, okay. Now the other thing that I never mentioned is that another reason that they came up here, I think, is because, one, they could find a place where they could do their engineering. I mean, this is not like Standard Aircraft where you built 500, like Standard Aircraft built 1 plane an hour, and that's significant. Whereas these guys, I think, they built 75 planes altogether of 27 different varieties, if that's what I'm reading correctly. And and again, there were just not 2 of these guys, there were more of these guys. And now Charles Porter, now I'm a guy that plays with models, and but just look at these things. They, even the bad photography, they look perfect, and it shows all the idiosyncrasies of the well, this is the petrol right here. This is the right here, and wheels and pontoons, and of course this is what your airplanes ran on, because there were no airports, there were no blacktop macadam runways with restaurants and all that. That was still in a dream. But these guys are barnstormers, and they talk about a story of the guys coming up. They flew out of Massachusetts on one of these planes, or one like it, and they went up to Albany, went right up Champlain, and crossed over into Canada, and then came down the St. Lawrence. And for those of us who are natives can remember the Long Sault Rapids, and thank God for the seaway. But somehow or other, they landed the plane. The visibility got so bad that they landed the plane somewhere on the Long Sault. And I guess you had to be there. But then they got to Ogdensburg. Finally, they took off again when the weather cleared, and they ran out of gas below what they call below Ogdensburg, which would be just beyond the state hospital. And they went to Canada, or somebody had got to a phone, and they brought them some gas, and they got them back up to where they're supposed to be. But these guys were brave, okay, very brave. And, oh, Jim McDonald. And the people that were connected to this is unbelievable. And you can take any one of these stories, the professor mentions that James McDonald came to Clarkson because this is McDonnell Douglas. This is the guy in charge of McDonnell Douglas Corporation that went on, well, this picture here, 5,000 Phantoms. 5,000 Phantoms. This is when he was a pilot and an engineer. Again, obviously he's got a degree. And then there's your Phantom jet, and there he is. And he came to Clarkson, and the professor met him there and said, "Now listen, Mr. McDonald, are you going to tell us what happened at Huff-Daland?" On his resume, worked at Huff-Daland Airplane Corporation, and anybody that was there never denied that they were there, for whatever reason. But he left in kind of a hurry, and there is a story there, but I don't think we'll ever know it. But anyway, there's always a story. Okay, how are we doing there? Keep going. All right, full speed ahead. All right. Okay, and again, this is a nice picture of Catherine Fitzgerald, and great lady, a great role model. And these guys are all good role models. Now, all right, this is the 1B, and below it is that's a trainer, okay. But when you're looking at these rascals, what they did was they eliminated the cables on the wings. Like, we're going to look at a plane that was made in Ithaca. Because what the Ithaca Museum did down just off of 81 there, Cornell territory, they built this Tommy engine. Have you seen it? You're going to take me. I'll buy you lunch, okay? And but they got it going, and it shows them flying it at the Ithaca airfield. And they've got a nice airfield just like Potsdam and Macadam and everything. And they took off on grass and landed on grass. Now there's something there that I got to ask about. But anyway, they did away with those wires, and you can see the wires on that and the cables on that. But they did away with that, and shock absorbers here. And again, this engine here, is probably a Continental or a Liberty. And that's a radiator, okay? And that's a bomber, I think. Yeah, 1B means bomber, and TA, boy. Yeah, anyway, I can't argue with that. But anyway, and what they did was they built 10 bombers, and for some reason they put one engine on it. Like that 1B, they put one engine on it, and there was supposed to be a forward machine gun mount that stuck out there, so that because they hadn't perfected the machine gun through the propeller. Then that was perfected by the Germans, I think, in World War I, and they hadn't got to that point yet. But they built 10 of them with one engine, and of course these planes, once they were built, the Army test pilots from Cook Field at Dayton, Ohio, and the Army inspected every one of these, and they sent them either by rail, and in 23, before they went to the dusting, because that was declared a national emergency by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Department of Army, and so the money was flowing in. They said, "What's it going to cost to do this?" And so hopefully they got their cost plus a reasonable profit. But anyway, they built this Army bomber with just one, and so they took it to McCook Field, and they just came back and said, "Sorry, fellas, we're not investing in a single-engine bomber plane." And so they paid him. I assume they paid him, and again, I don't know how they pay now, or I don't, They paid because they bought 2 or 3 of these bombers, and they tested them, and I'm sure they got a check for that in the mail. But they were stuck with 8 of them, and so, leave it to the air test pilots, they know everybody. So they sold one of them to Brazil, and they sold 7 of them to Argentina. And I bet you if we get on a bus or a train and get down there, we probably find 1 or 2 still flying. But anyway, anybody game? Anyway, okay, where am I? And let's move on. And but again, when they ended up, the technology was changing so quickly, because by 25 to 35, that 10-year span, I mean, just look at this and look at you come in with a model thing. And the thing of it is, Jimmy Doolittle was testing these planes. He was just a young test pilot, and there's a letter in the file somewhere, and I actually held it. It said the office of Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, and who'd ever think I'd be doing that? And he tells about, dear Mr. Wyatt, please be advised that I remember flying those planes, they were good quality, and I really felt safe. What we ordered and what we got is exactly what it was. And he had a high recommendation coming from Mr. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle. All right, and if I don't get to it, ask me how Charlie Lindbergh got involved in this. And so look at the people that were there. Developed James McDonald and Jimmy Doolittle and Lindbergh. And I don't see how in the world we can brush those people off. I really don't see how we can just say, oh, well, it didn't amount to anything. Well, all right, let me push the button here. Okay, now, let me go to crop dusting. And they didn't plan on making crop dusters, okay? They made training planes. And the training plane was 2 seats side by side, so that the trainee was here and the veteran was here, and then there was a cockpit for 1 person up front. And what they didn't know it, and nobody knew it, that they were building the perfect crop. And that's exactly what it was. Because this plane could come along, and I've seen crop dusters up here, very short, and there's one down in Lowville, we were just in the paper here the other day. But the crop duster would go along 80, 90 miles an hour, and then it would come right down, because you've got hedgerows and trees, come right down, level off at 30 or 40 feet, and skim across the top of the cotton, or up here the corn or the hay. And they would drop the dust, and then they get to the end, and you got a tree, a 100-foot tree, and they would just boom, go right up. And they're great to watch, but anyway. And right now, they don't do any more powder. Like this is lead arsenic that they drop on the boll weevil, and it's still active in the soil, you know. And so things have come a long ways, but again, they developed the crop dusters with 14 to 18 planes that were shipped from Ogdensburg to Macon, Georgia, I think is where they started, or up there. There's 2 places, and then of course Delta went to Atlanta. And but they had Miss Fitzgerald there to keep an eye on everybody and keep the arguments to a civil tone. And there was oh my goodness. Let me go to. I've got some. Okay, I got some test pilots here. And that's Harry Harris was there, Porter was there, and there was another test pilot. But anyway, here's the Huff-Daland. Yeah, this is at Ogdensburg, and this is the cute little. This is the petrel or the puffer, and again, they didn't realize that what a machine it was. And that machine there is a petrel, and right on the very back of the wing right here, it says, it's not my imagination, but I think it says, it doesn't say Potsdam, it says petrol, I think. Anyway, and that's what I want it to be. And this is in Quebec, and this is something to do with Fairchild. Now Fairchild was another, and there must have been maybe 50 to 100 companies that were racing to come up with the new airplane, the new style, and the new stuff. And but here's a bunch of guys, and they're looking at the pontoons, and this is from Montreal. But Fairchild had their planes, but they were paid by the Canadian government to take pictures of the resources, take pictures of the rivers, the canyons, the mountains, and the woods, and whatever. And I think what it was, their planes weren't that agile, but they could put a camera onto a petrel and swoop down and look for Bigfoot or whatever they were doing. But anyway. Okay, now, this Inzani engine, it's a rotor engine, and it was made by an Italian, and this is, okay, this is about 1905, over here, that's the Inzani engine, 1905, and that was a 200 horsepower engine or more. Now, when a little guy, 5 foot tall, talks about 200 horsepower engines in 1920 and before, they don't believe him. Now, this guy here is in, and Delta has done a beautiful job of this, okay? They got a few dates mixed up, but I got it figured out. But this is a retired Art Arace, A-R-A-C-E, and he has worked in Delta, and him and I have got a lot in common, and probably a lot in common with other airplane enthusiasts. And there's two of them. There's the original one that they made out of parts, and that's at the Smithsonian. But then Art and a bunch of other volunteers, they got an engine, and if you go on Delta 2006, Delta Flight Museum, this will give you the whole story, and you can look at it for hours. And you want to go out to the shop and get your glue and some screws and see what you can do. But anyway, how we doing? All right, now, baseball. Okay, now, is this Fenway Park or what? But here's the Huff-Daland, and they came there very family-oriented from what I can see, and that's so important. And Mr. Huff was an avid coach. He was a runner, probably very active in his church, whatever church that may have been, which is wonderful. But here's the baseball team, and look at that, it's got HD, Huff-Daland, and I can't quite make, but that's some sort of an aircraft or an eagle or something. And at that time, people need to pick themselves up from the war and the pandemic and go out and have some fun. And that looks, I don't know who that might be. Mr. DeLon and I have the same issues, I think. But anyway, that's the baseball team. And I don't know nothing about baseball, except that I quit for the good of the team. Now, now a brief timeline, U.S. crop dustings, okay. This is what I'm looking for. 1921, John McCready, test pilot in Cook Field, Dayton, Ohio, flying. They knew they needed, something was coming for crop dusting, so they took an old Jenny, World War I airplane, put some canvas bags on the side of it, and they dusted a peach orchard in Ohio and killed some caterpillars. Didn't make any sense, but caterpillars in a peach orchard in Ohio. And so that was 1921, okay? Now, 1922, forget it, yeah. This agricultural scientist, Dr. Cord, all right, there you go. Get back up here. Gotta have a pen in my hand. And he worked, Dr. Cord, in Louisiana, Tallulah, in Louisiana. And he worked for USDA Delta Laboratory with crops, okay? And they were watching this boll weevil, and Dr. Code was looking for the ideal airplane to apply dust. And he meets up with Mr. Woolman, Mr. Woolman was an amateur pilot. He had a Jenny that he flew. And him and Mr. Code knew of each other, but I don't think Mr. Woolman realized, he probably figured that the workers on the farm, the sharecroppers, would just load up bags of dust and go out and sprinkle it over the whatever. And this was a huge thing because I don't know if we had any social welfare system at that time, but this is very important. And this has involved thousands of agriculturalists and farmers and workers and children. And so 1923, so Dr. Code and Mr. Woolman met up, and Mr. Woolman says, "Oh, you're gonna drop the dust by air? Well, I'm a pilot and all this and that." And so then the Harry Harris, the famous test pilot, Harry in World War I, he flew a bomber over the Alps. Now, if somebody asked me to fly a bomber over the Alps, and it's made out of corn stalks and chicken crates, I would say, I'm going to join the infantry, and but this is what these guys did, and it was a whole outfit, a whole battalion or whatever that flew over the Alps from Italy to wherever, and in 1924, and of course, when the government steps in and says, we're going to be all driving electric cars in 5 years, well, guess what? We're going to be driving electric cars in 5 years. It's a dream, but let's hope they can do it. And test flight for crop dusting. All right, now this is the dates. 1923 to 1924 was the best year for the Ogdensburg factory. They were getting they had orders for the 18 crop dusters. And again, this was an experimental thing. So if they called up Miss Fitzgerald in that factory and talked to one of the engineers, from Ohio or wherever, well, we want this changed and that changed. Well, within a week or 10 days, it was either changed, developed, or whatever. So it wasn't a huge. You know what it's like to talk to Ford or General Motors about your car, and you say you bought a car with us, Mr. Friedel, but anyway, you know how it goes. And they could be right on it and develop it, and they would even maybe send a technician from their factory out there to see about it. First commercial dusting for insect control was the Robert Shaw plantation in Mississippi, 1,800 acres at 35 cents an acre. Now this is 1924. Now today, what is that today? Is that $10, $20, or $30 in today's figures? But give me a job, I may learn how to fly at 1,800 times $10. I think maybe I could learn to fly a little bit. And Georgia State, okay, and Mr. Woolman, again, Mr. Woolman was an extension agent, and he was the liaison between all these big shots from out of area, begins commercial crop, and he set it up, and he had the farmers and the workers and people that, and they went into a farm, and he talked to them and got them on board, as well as the planters. So he did the sales work, and he was a tremendous salesman. But the man, there's a video on there from 1959 or whatever. It's on the Delta Museum website, and I think I've got a lot in common, ethical and plain spoken, that sort of thing. Now let's hit this other one. Oh, all right, I remember this. That truck there, sitting there, it says Sherman on it. That's a Potsdam fella right there. And he worked on the Seaway. This is the early 60s. I think that truck is what, a 62, early 60s. And this building, and I remember driving by that. And in 1923, the business got so great because it takes a long time. Once you build a wing out of wood, you got to glue it. You got to do this, that, and the other. And then you have to take the fabric and go over it. And it takes sewing, and it takes varnish, and anybody ever done that? Okay, all right. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of people. And they rented this building, and this building here was getting ready to be torn down, and that is on the end of Elizabeth Street and Riverview Drive right there, where the Augsburg building is, or they built the Augsburg building there in the early 60s, I think. And but that was 5,000 square feet, and they rented that in 24. And so actually they started to move from the building on over across the river there towards, next to Diamond Match, or Standard Shade Roller. And, okay, now here we go. I'm gonna leave that right there. Don't move. All right, now this is great pictures here, and thank you, the ladies here. And that is Mr. Woolman, big man, slow talker, true Southerner, although educated in Indiana. And there's Dr. Crow, and Woolman actually told Dr. Code, taught him how to fly. And so, alrighty, yeah, he's a big guy. And here is, and he was very down to earth, and it says in that, and you pick it up if you go there to the website, the Delta Museum website, and Delta did a beautiful job on this. He had 13, when he retired, he had 13,000 employees at Delta Airlines. And he was so miffed that he couldn't remember every one of them. Well, yeah, I know the feeling. And so anyway, how it became, we got in 1925, September 1925, Huff-Daland Airplane Factory moved out, and they went south to Bristol, PA, and that was a boat building facility. And they came back to where they left, if that makes sense, which it doesn't, but they worked as Keystone Aircraft, which was huge buildings and hundreds of workers and stuff like that. And so they came back, and I don't know if it was a lease purchase option or if they actually had the cash to buy that facility, but there were 10 buildings on it, and it was like 30 acres. It had river access, Delaware River was right there, so they could build all the float planes and kick them off the edge and see if they're gonna float. And they still wanted to pursue the Super Cyclops bomber. And that picture there still doesn't show three propellers, but whatever, it's getting close. And this is one of the trainers. Okay, now what they did was they made an air ambulance. And maybe that Quebec photo I showed you. They made an air ambulance, and it would carry 6 stretchers and a doctor. And that may have been that part of that, the plane with the floats on, because if you're doing rescue work along the St. Lawrence, and back then, where would you land? And so, you know, floats, and you could float into a harbor and get your injured people to the city hospitals. And, all right, what else we got here? All right, now, I wanna wrap this up, and again, I've only touched the iceberg. And if 2 or 3 of you guys go home and get on this and start reading, and you're there for hours and hours and hours and having fun like I did, and I'm anxious to learn more about it. And so, if somebody tries to brush off Huff-Daland, Malcolm, you just give him a slap for me, okay? Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, we want to finish up with this, and Carlene here is going to help me if I don't knock everything over. And we want to show you, come over here, we want to show you what can be done. And we do have a museum here that's agriculture. This is agriculture, okay?
So what you're gonna see is this Thomas Morse, it was a 100th anniversary flight in Ithaca that they did in 2018. So this is them filming the flight. If you wanna see this whole video, it's on YouTube. It's about a 20-minute flight from, you know, getting to the field to the entire flight. We're just gonna show you a few minutes of it. And then after this, happy to have questions for Kenny, and there's a little exhibit. I also just wanted to mention, because Kenny forgot to say, Catherine Fitzgerald is the one responsible for naming Delta Airlines, so that's pretty important. She's also the first female co-CEO of an airline company, the director, so that's pretty important too, so just had to say that.
You're welcome to go there and look at it. If you've got a wayward daughter or granddaughter, here.
And she's from Ogdensburg, so she's pretty cool.
I think they're priming it. burning. Watch that. Propeller fellow. This is the one that they built. It's new, old stock, but new. See, they're on the grass. Watch out that wood truck was. 3,000 people that turned out for this. And they just circle a couple times and put it back in the museum. But they're working on it for 11 years. So anybody wants to volunteer?
Oh, I know.
Any questions?
I thought that was a Morse.
What did I call it?
This is a Morse, yeah.
This is what did I call it? Yeah, that's
It's a
a,
Morse S4.
yeah, that's right, and it's smaller.
That's not a Huff-Daland though.
No, but it's so close.
Oh, I see.
And besides,
Okay.
how
I was
many
wondering
people
where
are-
that fit
I
in.
don't even know the difference between,
Okay.
Tommy is what they call it, and I think there was 400 built out of Ithaca plant, and they're in the original plant, so, yeah, but that's what they call Tommy. I didn't have nothing to do with that.
I trust that you made a good landing.
Yeah, you do.
He did. It goes on for like 15 more minutes, so if you want to see the whole thing. If you just put in Thomas Morse 1918 anniversary flight, I think that's the link, but. All right. Any questions for Kenny?
Yeah,
Do you have a date that the Ogdensburg actually put in a paved strip, or did they run with a dirt strip for a while?
This is, in the days of 1920, everything was dirt. I don't know where there was, I don't even know if Route 11 was paved. They came out with Route 11, it was a federal highway from wherever.
I think Route 37, which is now the Van Rensselaer Road,
Yes.
was paved in 1918.
There you go, all right, there's a man that was either there or.
Well, I wasn't there, but I read that coming up.